Great morning, world. Great morning, humans. Let me clear my throat. This is Dr. JC Doornick, aka the Dragon, and this is another Make Sense Monday, which is the live weekly portion of the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast. And today we are going to make sense of something that I call eye strain. And this is going to talk about this idea of learning how to manage what we refer to as forced perception. That's the eye strain analogy. And we do that by learning how to quiet the mind. So, welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC Doornick podcast and Make Sense Mondays. So, as this is the live portion and the unedited version, we always allow a few moments for people to come in live if they so choose. We do this every Monday at 8 o'clock a.m. And this is kind of a little bit of a sample of what we do in our mastermind. We come up with these interesting discussions. And when I say our mastermind, I'm referring to our private community called the Make Sense Academy. And I see some folks joining in now. Great morning to you, Susan. Great morning, Lori. And in that private community, we look to claim control of our mental state every morning, win the morning, win the day, and acknowledge the fact that if we don't consciously claim control of our morning by doing a set routine of things, including having this mastermind and discussion with a primary focus, on things that make us go, what we don't know is that we end up, it's interesting to think about end up. What that means is the difference between having life work around you or you working around life, pushing life around or letting life push you around. So that's what happens when we claim control. And the easiest way to claim control is to first acknowledge the fact that if you don't claim control, if you don't consciously claim control of your morning and thus your day, change the way you look at things so that the things that you look at will change, then what you'll be doing without knowing it until it's too late is handing the keys of trust over to the day and your regularly scheduled program, which only produced the results that you're trying to change. So welcome. Great morning, Colleen. Great morning, Deb. Great morning, Chris. Great morning, Lindsay. And great morning, Kathy. Love to see you guys here. Very, very excited about life in general. And that doesn't mean that that's because of the perception that life is great. I don't know about you, but if I allow myself to just perceive what most people are seeing, then I could see that there's a lot of challenges in life, financial challenges, economic challenges, but world challenges. And it's a lot of fear and concern and doubt and a lot of unknown right now. And it'd be very, very easy to get all twisted up about that because being twisted up is typically a side effect and a symptom, which has things like anxiety, depression, and nervousness and anger and things like that. Very, very commonly associated with us trying to control things that are out of our control. So if you look at the things that are happening in the world and you just allow yourself to run your regularly scheduled program and respond to it, then you'll be twisted up. In our community, we refer to these days where we feel like we're in a funk. We call it Funky Town. So this is about Make Sense Mondays, the Make Sense Academy, which is just in my opinion, just a genius idea where we take this idea that everybody's looking for mentorship and support and community and all of the tools that they need to get their headspace right and become the person that is the right person to execute with the tools that we provide. So what we do is we do that in a group format. So rather than having to pay one-on-one high fees for a personal coach, everybody gets that at a very, very low cost, less than it costs you to go out to dinner. And that's what it costs to coach with me. A lot of people ask me when I meet them at events, they said, "Hey, I want to work with you. What does it cost to coach you?" And I say $48 a month. And they say, what's the catch? And I said, there's no catch. We wanted to create a forum where everybody can grow and collaborate with one another, not just the person they're coaching with, and never pay anything else, no increased price or leveled up price, but something that is affordable and attainable to everyone. See, I think that there's a lot of people out there that are stuck right now that maybe can't afford some things, but have genius inside of them. So we're fascinated to see what happens when that genius comes out, gets, out of the creative mold and into the developmental stage and then into the execution stage, take it to market, monetize it, all of that. So that's what the Make Sense Academy is about. If you're into that sort of thing, um, then reach out and just say, hey, makes sense. Tell me about this academy. And the price keeps going up as we increase the value of it. But anybody that's already in it gets to keep their price for the remainder of it. Never goes up, ever, ever. So I'm that guy that keeps showing up. That's what I'm here to do. I'm the guy that says he's going to do something and come hell or high water does it, whether people come with me or not. And that's what you're experiencing here with Make Sense Academy. This is my commitment that has a lot of value for myself as well. Think about that when you're the next time you're creating content and maybe going live like I am right now on multiple platforms, which is a scary thing to do. Sometimes we get too caught up in what others think of us and we forget how it is, training for yourself. When I commit to doing something and it's a full commitment, and it encompasses knowing what all the hard work is and things. And I say things like, I'm going to do it no matter what, whether people show up or not, whether it's lucrative or not. That is something that helps. It helps in that situation to acknowledge what's in it for you otherwise. So it's just an honor and a privilege to be doing this for so many years right now. And I can't tell you how much it's served me to find myself in a position where I go live and I don't even think about what other people are thinking about it, right? I got to reel it in. Great morning to you, Neil Jarandola. Good to see you, my friend. Just saw my dad yesterday. Okay, let's get into this. So this is eye strain. But before I do that, I wrote a little passage this morning that talks about acknowledging this idea, this curious idea behind what is the goal of life. So I just wrote this and I want to share it with you as a little bit of a warm up. So I wrote that the goal of life is to navigate yourself to full awareness. I feel like that's what I'm doing. You have to allow yourself, but navigate yourself to full awareness to the point where you stop resisting the illusion of what you perceive is happening on the outside and become aware that which is, and then become aware of the fact that things are happening on the inside as well, right? We don't paint this picture in this full awareness. We don't fall prey to painting this picture that life is what we see. What we see is what we get. We start to recognize when we become fully aware that what we see is what we think we get, and what we think we get has been taught to us and programmed to us. From that space, and this is the work that we do in the Make Sense Academy and the work that I do with my interface response system, which we're going to go over in the Make Sense Academy this week. That's the first step to awakening, is to recognize and acknowledge that you're running a program that's prompting your perspective and your perceptions right now. So if you think that you're having a good day or a bad day, if you think that somebody's attacking you, or you think that you've run into a tough patch, it's just about acknowledging that what you think has been prompted by others, your mother, father, teacher, preacher, people that have programmed you to think a certain way. And that leads perfectly. Great morning, Diane. That leads perfectly into today's rise up and this discussion that I call eye strain, because what it indicates is that human beings, for the most part, are struggling to make sense of things using things like their eyes and ears But we forget very often that our brain is in control of those things too. Our brain, our ego, and things like that. So I call it eye strain because we work way too hard to try to take reality the way it is and make it make sense in a way that the way our brains have been programmed will say yes, acceptable, right? So let's get into this. So the first thing that I wrote is I said, they say that seeing is believing. You've heard of that concept before. Seeing is believing. Great morning, everybody. Seeing is believing. But if we reverse that, because we're always here to change the way we look at things, thus allowing ourselves to see the things that we look at change. But if we reverse it, what if we'd have to ask the question from a curious space? What if believing is seeing? What if your belief system is what causes what you see? See, we've been prompted to think that what we see, we believe. But what if it's the other way around? And you can't really deny that it's not that way because this is one of those things that we just don't know for sure. Typically, the things that we claim that we know, we've been taught to know. I know this because we see two people looking at the same scenario in life and thinking something different about it. So what I mean by this reversal of what if believing is seeing is what if what we are seeing has been influenced by what we are already believing? What if your belief systems that you've been taught and that are programmed and wired into your head to the point where you think you came up with them, what if they're prompting and influencing what it is that you see? So is seeing a function of involuntary, is seeing a function that is like involuntarily forcing us to validate what the mind already believes? So what that means is if your mind already believes in something, has concepts about something, entertain the idea that your eyes and ears work for your mind. It's like selective hearing, selective seeing. What are they going to select? They're going to select things that make sense based on your belief system. I think that's super cool. So it's an interesting observation of human behavior where we see human beings, and I use the word feverishly struggling with great effort, way more effort than needed to see and hear things and make sense of them. I refer to this whole system as the sense-making system or a sense-making machine. So our eyes and ears have the capabilities to see and hear almost everything that is actually going on. Here's what I mean by that. Step back from it for a second out of your program and just recognize that your eyes and your ears were engineered to actually see and hear actually everything that's going on. So why do we have selective hearing and selective seeing? So play with that for a second, because your eyes and ears hear everything and see everything, but we have some sort of a filter built in. So who's running the filter? So I think that's really cool. So in fact, we have our eyes and our ears actually have a lot more capabilities than our thoughts. Let me read this exact. So our eyes and ears have the capabilities to see and hear almost everything that is actually going on. In fact, way more than our brains can comprehend. So can you agree with me that what your eyes and ears see in its natural state, if nothing was controlling it, is way more than our brain can process? Meaning, do you think your brain, the human brain, is capable of entertaining any possibilities that your eyes and ears see? Or can you see that your brain, and this is important in your response system, this gets you into trouble or it frees you. Can you see how your brain doesn't want to see things just as they are? It wants to see things as it wants to see things. So your eyes and ears begin to work for your brain, not the other way around. So seeing is not believing. I think that believing causes seeing and the selective hearing and things like that. So our thoughts are for the most part linear. It's interesting to think about thoughts. We have 40 to 70,000 of them a day. They're linear, meaning, they're basically controlled by your past experience and your perception and things like that. However, the functionalities of seeing and hearing, if you were to look at your thoughts and the linear nature of them, it would be like fishing with a couple of hooks, right? Fishing for things. But if you look at things like seeing and hearing, much, much more broad spectrum, it's like fishing with like some sort of a massive net, all encompassing massive net. That's what seeing and hearing is. But the brain that's and the thoughts that operate linear will control the seeing. So how does this show up in your life? How does this show up in somebody else's life? Have you ever just met somebody that's like stubborn, that just won't entertain another idea other than theirs? That's how it shows up, right? So you can look at yourself in the mirror when nobody's watching, which is a little strange. But what you can do is you can ask yourself to just acknowledge any statements, maybe your beliefs, your core, values and things like that, that have exclamation points at the end. Statements that are this and nothing else. So what does that do to you? Is it makes you not look at anything else, and you practice these things called cognitive bias. Like you only allow things in. There's the filter. There's the selective hearing and seeing. You only allow things in that make sense in coordination and connection with your belief system, because you put an exclamation point behind it rather than put a question mark behind it and say, I don't know. I very often, I teach this in our academy. I teach everybody to, when you first see something and you have your knee jerk reflex, that's right, I have no lenses. The first thing you should do is just back up from your program response and say, HMMM. And what that word stands for is haven't made up my mind. What a powerful thing to do, to not have made up your mind about things and allow yourself to hear and absorb something else. So with this massive net that seeing and hearing have, they can see everything, right? Human beings can see and hear everything, but the brain can only process and make sense of so much of what it sees and hears. And this is where things get a little bit confusing for human beings. Right? Because the brain can't process everything that the eyes and ears see and hear, it gets confusing for humans in their attempt to make sense of the world. So human beings will only allow themselves to make sense of things in a way that best suits and fits into the model that they were taught to use and see. So go back to your formative years and everything that you've learned from your mother, your father, your teacher, your preacher, society, consuming every day, always in support, and then what's been paid for by evolution. You've been taught and trained to see things in a certain way. You refer to that as your beliefs and your core values. So my curiosity in this discussion this morning sits with the challenge of whether or not do you have the ability to challenge whether or not that's an effective and efficient way of looking at things, right? It's interesting because we kind of get comfortable and certain exclamation point that the way we look at things is the way things are. But then we hear this statement of, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So if you're looking to change your reality, but you're trying to change your reality without changing the way you look at things, that's the definition of insanity, but that kind of snuck up unconsciously. So that's where my curiosity is. Are we missing something? Are we missing something important because we have that selective seeing and hearing based on our core beliefs and our belief system? Are we missing something that we normally wouldn't see that might be providing some sort of a breakthrough that we're seeking right now? I think a lot of people are looking for a breakthrough, but I think a lot of people are holding themselves back from that breakthrough because they're not allowing them to see something beyond what they're trained to see. Oh boy, if you get on top of this, you're going to have some fun, because you could change the way you look at things anytime during the day. And that could be part of your system, your coping system, or your advancement system. So remember also that when our eyes are looking and our ears are listening, our brain at the same time is thinking. See, eyes see, ears hear, brains think. Brains have other functions as well, but your thoughts come from your brain. So if you acknowledge that while I'm seeing and hearing, my brain is thinking, and you know that we have 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day, that's a potential disaster. right there to just say, so I'm letting my brain that has 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and for whatever reason, grabs onto like four of them and claims that is reality. And I'm letting that control what I see and hear. Of course, we have selective hearing and seeing. So the next time, you hear somebody say something in your mind that's preposterous, you have to forgive them for they know not what they do. They're unaware of this going on. So that's part of the reason why we're advancing so fast in the Make Sense Academy. And even if you're just listening to the podcast, Make Sense with Dr. JC Dornick podcast, is you're entertaining ideas. If you just simply entertain ideas and recognize what's going on behind the scenes, you're going to move fast. So all this stuff prompted, the acknowledgement that the brain is in effect using the eyes and the ears to see what it has been programmed to want to see. So if you think about it, the eyes see a great deal more than the brain has the ability to process. The brain must reel the eyes in. Say, okay, take it easy, eyes and ears. Reel the eyes and ears in so that it can claim some sort of control over reality. Now, how do you feel when you don't feel like you're in control of reality? You feel out of control. And that's not a good feeling. Out of control shows up in our world as things like anxiety, depression, moods and things like that. We don't like the way that feels. And if you look at how we treat those things, we immediately look to eradicate them with some sort of distractions or medications and things like that. And I'm not here to tell you what's good or bad. I'm just trying to point something out to you. So our brain can't handle it all. So it reels the eyes and ears in so that it can claim some sort of control. Otherwise, the world would appear, if a brain didn't do this, the world would appear as complete chaos. If we just allowed our eyes and ears to see things the way they were with no agenda or no persuasion of what we want to see, what's good, what's bad, and things like that, the world would probably show up as complete chaos. But at the same time, you would also allow yourself to see some things that you're not allowing yourself to see, or how you're allowing to see. One of the things that we teach in the interface response system in the assessment phase is to learn how to instill some tools in your belt that allow you to look at things from different vantage points in life, to walk around it, to go closer, to back up, to look at things through the eyes of the other person. So have you ever found yourself saying this? I think I saw, hey, did you see that? I think I saw it. Isn't that interesting? I think I saw. So there's the proof of it right there. So that would be the process of the brain taking what the eyes saw and coming up with its own interpretation that will suit its wants and needs and support the programmed mind. Remember, you're walking around with this brain that's looking at the world the way it was taught to look at the world. So as soon as you see something in the world that doesn't make sense in accordance with that or goes against what you've been taught, you're going to feel unsettled. You're going to feel like challenged, and you're going to do whatever you can to reel that back in and make sense of it. And you'll find yourself reeling it back in and making sense of it the way you were taught to make sense of it. That's not where growth takes place. Growth takes place outside the comfort zone, outside the box, right? And we talked about the other day, sometimes outside the box means looking inside the box and recognizing what's going on the inside. So rather than letting the eyes just see and the ears just hear, the brain gets in the way and tries to persuade and influence them to look and listen for the things that it desires rather than just what is. Now, if you practice meditation and you quiet the mind, what you do is you allow yourself to experience the world as it is, without ego, without the analytical mind and all of that stuff. That's what they say. Meditation is the practice of bypassing the analytical mind. Are you aware that you have an analytical mind that's judging and labeling and things like that? Now, part of that is survival, but are you aware of it? Are you aware of it? And have you given it the okay, or have you just given everything the okay? And you just trust every day and you're just going about your day. You see, I think about these things because I'm 53 right now and I'm recognizing that time is limited. I always knew it was limited, but now you can tell. So I want to get on top of some of these things. as we move closer to that proverbial day. So think about that moment where you find yourself trying to make sense of something and experience the frustration of perhaps why someone or something happened to you, or someone said something to you. Think about that moment where that happens. So you see what they said, you hear what they said. However, you just can't understand why they said it. So there's this moment of confusion, and your body is kind of building up this system of saying, was that good? Did they just mess with me? Is this an attack, or were they trying to compliment me? This is why it's so confusing when we use social media and texting and everything like that, right? Because you can never tell. We've gotten rid of voice. We've gotten rid of the visual of talking to somebody right now. So you're in that moment where you're like, you can't really understand what they said or what just happened. So perhaps it looked and sounded like some sort of an attack by the way the words came out, the tonicity. Are you aware of how you pick up on tonicities and label them? Isn't that an interesting thing that we do? We jump to conclusions with a knee-jerk reaction and we label tonicities. I find that fascinating. So the perceived attack seems personal, as it is threatening to your core values and belief system. When you think something is an attack or it's personal, it's because it is going against your core values and your beliefs. Where did you get those core values and beliefs? From your mother, your father, your teacher, your preacher, right? All of that perceiving being controlled by that pre-programmed mind that's sitting inside of your skull right now, programmed just like a computer. So I like to refer to that fascinating, human behavior, this idea of all of this work that we're going through. I like to refer to it as the topic of discussion, the label of eye strain. So when I say eye strain, I'm referring to the fact that we're working way too hard on all this stuff. We don't have to work so hard. Um, and this is all not your fault. It's all associated with your mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, evolution, and all that. And it's an interesting observation right now to note that children, are affected by this even more. It's advancing because they're in this educational system, and as well as simultaneously in this parent system that's teaching kids to force themselves to be interested in things that they're not. Now, this happened when I was a kid as well, but think about this. Remember back in that time where you were kind of daydreaming and drawing cartoons in class. That's happening more and more now. Kids are more distracted than ever. And in one sense, they're in this imaginary world, right? So that first day that they get caught doing that in class, and the teacher or the parent says, pay attention, right? Almost in a forceful way, because they're frustrated that they're teaching and nobody's listening. That's an interesting observation as well. As a parent, if I'm trying to teach my kids something and they're not listening, why would I get mad at that? I could say it's disrespectful, but I'm mad because the kid is not interested in what I'm interested in. And what I'm trying to do is teach the kid to think like me. That's where the programming starts. I'm not saying good or bad, just be aware, right? So then you jump into this, the kid that gets yelled at, say, pay attention, jumps into this full body posture change and facial expression change that in their best, attempt resembles what it would look like physically to pay attention. That's what kids do. They sit up straight and they look, right? And they curl their hands and feet. And so you begin practicing this strained paying attention at a very, very young age until it's learned and wired in. So once again, you're forgiven for not what you do. If you're seeing yourself doing a lot of eye strain, and now you know that eye strain refers to the hard work, but it's referring to the fact that your brain is controlling what it sees and hears, not allowing you to see and hear what it is. So that's why it's such a strain, is because you're trying to look at something that looks like something else and make it look like what you want it to look at. That's what eye strain is. So you begin practicing this strained paying of attention until it's wired in. And when something's wired in, it's very hard to stop because you think that you came up with it and it's a good idea. It's a habit. It's what you always do. It's your comfort zone. So this carries on into our lives later on in life, where we find ourselves forcing our focus. This is what eye strain is, forcing our focus and attention towards the things that we feel that we should. Make sense? Almost there. So, as someone that seeks healthy responses, this is what I'm interested in. I'm a seeker of healthier responses. And what a healthy response is something that allows me to see something, perceive it, and receive it and respond in connection and in support with where I want to go in life. And if I want to grow, then I have to change if I'm not growing. So I seek healthy responses, and that means less distractions and the path of least resistance towards my desired goals and dreams. I would assume everybody would be interested in that, unless you're just like, good enough is good enough right now. So naturally, this prompts me to become open and curious about changing the way that I look at things, knowing that that action step of changing the way I look at things, we talked about that, may help me change the things that I'm looking at. And that's a power move. If you can learn how to change the way you look at things and entertain things, allow yourself to do that, well, then things are going to start looking different. You could take the perspective of the person that's next to you that gets a different result in the same situation. You can change. See, when one becomes more conscious and allows themselves to look and listen to things from different vantage points and perspectives, well, they see things differently. That's what it means. They're allowing themselves to see things differently, and the desired results very often become leveraged. So if you're looking for different results, different desired results, well, it would begin with you allowing yourself to see things differently. If you're stubborn and you're involved in this eye strain concept, then how could you expect something to change? It's always going to look the same. You know, you're trying to build an airplane in the sky, teach a goldfish to climb a tree. It just doesn't work, right? I know somebody out there is like, I could teach a goldfish to climb a tree. So what is even more interesting about this is acknowledging that the best practice of achieving this is just the simplicity of allowing yourself. This is practice. It takes time to just quiet your mind. You know, placing a pause of the strain of the eyes and the ears. You have to acknowledge, I mean, I'm having eye and ear strain right now. And just saying, I'm going to give that a pause. I'll come back to it sometime. Placing it on pause and just allowing yourself to quiet the mind. So that would be the practice of meditation, which I am deeply entrenched in right now. And it's probably one of the greatest words of advice I can give anybody is practice meditation and learn how to quiet your mind. I do it several times a day. So if you really think about it, thinking is of little use. Thinking is of little use to us unless we learn to also unthink. Let me say that again because it's so important. If you think about it, thinking is of no use to us if we don't learn to also unthink. And that's what it means to quiet your mind. Because if all you do is think, well, then you're going to think based on the wiring of your current program mind. But if you can learn how to unthink, you can create the space for rewiring. Rewiring cannot happen unless you allow space for it. To quiet the program mind. So something interesting to note. You'll notice that if, for the most part, any image or statue that resembles Buddha, this is an interesting thing to observe. If you look at anything of Buddha, Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy. So you're allowed to look at it. Any statue of Buddha positions him in the same fashion. He's typically seated, hands positioned in his lap, eyes closed, and he's in a position that resembles one of meditating, right? He's meditating. He's in a state of meditation with a quiet mind. Insinuating, the reason why you always see that is insinuating the lesson of the path of least resistance. This practice of meditation is the practice of quieting the mind. I think I'm just trying to encourage you to meditate here, not buy into everything. In fact, I wouldn't buy into anything that I say, nor would I buy into anything either someone else says or what you say to yourself. I wouldn't buy into anything. I would say, HMMM, haven't made up my mind. That's what I would do. But that's me. So this practice of meditation is the practice of quieting the mind. So most people look at meditation as an occasional temporary practice for 15, 20 minutes a day, sometimes 2 times a day. That's the way I began as well, is I consciously practiced meditation. And it really helped me quiet the mind And it carries enormous value for anyone that does that. Anybody that does that once or twice a day, it's a game changer. However, what's really cool about meditation and learning the stuff that we're talking about in the private community interface response system, like any habit, when practiced with consistency over time, it habituates. That's what happens when you practice something with consistency. So you do 100 days of meditation, even if it's one day, it's going to start becoming comfortable and part of what we call your new normal. And for this to happen, that's an amazing thing, because then you start to learn how to meditate without having to sit down and listening to a mantra and closing your eyes. You can actually go about your day, your regularly daily interactions, and do it in a state of quieting your mind. So when you really get good at practicing the stuff that we teach in the Make Sense Academy, and this will come out in my book, and you can learn bits and pieces of it in my podcast. When you learn how to quiet the mind and you practice the interface response system, it starts to wire in, and you start to notice that you start looking at things and receiving them with a quieted mind. How do you know what that looks like? Somebody that you know that never loses control. They seem to always see the bright side of things. They seem to just not overreact to anything. And you'll know that if they're one of our students, they'll respond to any crisis by saying, interesting, but I haven't made up my mind about it yet. I'm going to think about it if that's okay. Isn't that cool? So finding your new healthy, strain-free perception of stimuli to be a simple sound like, That's all it has to be. Finding that new, healthy, strain-free perception of stimuli can just sound like this. Haven't made up my mind. So rather than the commencement of straining yourself to make sense and combating what's going on, straining yourself to make sense of things the way that your programmed mind and ego has taught you to, and the way that you think that you desire to. So this allowing you to use your eyes and your ears the way that they were truly created, to just simply look and listen to what actually is. Have you ever allowed yourself to just look and listen to things the way that they actually are? And more importantly, are you conscious enough? And it's not easy, because you're probably pissed at me right now because I'm threatening, right? Something that you think is exclamation point. But can you see how you're controlling things? And that might be the thing that's in the way. You know what people say, I'm in my own way. Well, now you know what that means. I'm in my own way means I'm controlling the way I look at things. To get out of your own way is to allow your eyes and ears to just see things as they are, with no predetermined predictive projection. Okay, not strained by not strained by the brain, that thing that's in your head trying to control things. Make sense? So love and appreciate you all. Love, 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 and just feel so blessed and honored to be able to do this. This is like training and therapy for me. And the breakthroughs that people are having in the group are just extraordinary. Watching somebody come in just like in that learning phase and having desires to be happier, healthier, and wealthier and all of that stuff, but then settling just back into themselves and recognizing that most everything that they ever dreamed of having, they already have. They're looking inside the box, not just outside the box, unwrapping the box that's always been there, learning how to celebrate and enjoy the present moment rather than always being connected to the future. No sense in being connected to the future all the time, because you'll never be able to appreciate what you have when you get there. You have it already, and that's the present. That's the now. So if you learned something today, give it away. That's how it'll stay. Love and appreciate you. Enjoy this day. Bye-bye now.